So you're listening to me, Alyssa Barron-Mensah, Managing Director of BALLE. Welcome to BALLE's new webinar series called Prosperity for All. We are so excited to be in this conversation with you all today. So I'm going to review a bit of housekeeping and then move to introducing the series and our goals for it and our speakers for today. So on the housekeeping front, if you're dialed in by phone but you have not joined us in the webinar room, you can find a link in your reminder email from Ali Walker. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes for you to fully get in the webinar room, so if it's just taking a second to load, don't worry. Because of the number of webinar participants, we have the phone line muted. That means if you have any questions for our presenters during the webinar, you can type your question in the public chat window. Maggie, Lynn, and Alfa might answer a question during their presentation, but we'll hold most of those questions to the end of the webinar when we have time set aside for moderated Q&A and discussion. If you have technical difficulties at any point during the webinar, we have a slightly different process today than usual for folks who join our other webinars. So if you're having trouble, what you'll do today is to note this in the public chat window along with your email address. And our staff member, Ali Walker, will then email you offline and will help you get your tech difficulty worked out. So as a reminder, at the end of each webinar, we email everyone registered a link to a full recording of the webinar, the presentation slides, and a copy of the questions from the chat conversation. We will also be including some additional resources from some of today's speakers. So watch for all of that in an email from Ali Walker over the next couple of days. So I want to share a little bit more about this series that we're calling Prosperity for All. It grows out of BALLE's inquiries over the past several years about our vision statement and how to get there. So our vision, for folks who may not be familiar, is to create, within a generation, a global network of interconnected local economies that work in harmony with nature to support a healthy, prosperous, and joyful life for all people. So our inquiry here is really about the all people component of this vision statement. Is our movement currently serving all people? Are we working together to create health and prosperity and joy for all members of our communities? So more and more communities we found are starting to do work and are looking to go deeper together in working across differences. They may be racial or ethnic differences, political differences, socioeconomic differences, religious, sexual orientation. But at a time when our broader society feels more polarized than ever, so many of us are seeking a deeper community with each other. And we have a sense that if we can find new ways of being together, of talking with each other, and of working together, that so much more is possible as we work to build a new economy and new forms of community. We know there's so much we have to learn from each other, so how can we continue to explore that? Further, we know we're a community rooted in the importance of local ownership. So we know that if ownership and access to opportunity stays in the same limited hands in which it currently resides nationally and globally, we can't reach our ultimate goals of a world that works for all people. We know it won't really be a new economy at all if power and privilege stays in the same small number of hands as it does now. So really this conversation and ultimately all of our work is about, it's not just more and more robust local ownership. It also matters who owns those businesses. And so this inquiry continues. Does everyone in our community have the opportunity to fulfill their entrepreneurial vision? To get access to funding for their great ideas? To have the support of their community once they launch their businesses? And if not, what can we do about that together? So that brings us to today's questions and the start of our new series. Our goal here is to really learn to be in conversation together about race and class and diversity and inclusiveness, to be in deeper conversation and to start exploring the skills that we can build as entrepreneurs, as local economy conveners, as funders, and as all others that are working to support local ownership to really work together toward advancing prosperity for all. So as we start this webinar-based discussion today, we've got some suggestions for how to be in this conversation together, but I'm noting that the slides are not yet loading, so let me pause for a second and see if I can get them up. Perfect. So like I said, let's be in conversation. We're in conversation today with these wonderful ladies, Maggie Anderson, Lynn, Benander, and Alfa Demmellash, and we're going to hear more about their stories. we're going to start with a facilitated conversation around 3 key questions, and then we'll move to, as we always do in our webinars, a good chunk of time for participant questions and interaction. And then the conversation suggestions that I was starting to touch on. Bring yourself wherever you are. We know that folks may be in a different place in their journey in exploring inclusiveness and economic justice, so wherever you are is just fine. Bring that. There's no such thing as a silly question. So as we work together to become more comfortable and adept at being in conversations about justice, inclusiveness, and diversity, whatever bubbles up for you, share that. We want to practice in being in conversation together. And finally, this is not about judging people. It is about trying to understand and really be open to perspectives and experiences that may be different than our own. And ultimately, our goal is to learn to work together across those differences as we try to encourage the development of local ownership and ultimately a new economy that brings health, prosperity, and joy to all members of our communities. So with that, I want to move us into actually getting to hear from these wonderful women that we have pulled together today. As I said, we'll walk through a couple of questions together, and you'll hear us in conversation with each other. And then in the second part of the webinar, we'll bring all of the participants into conversation with us as well. So Maggie, I believe you're in the webinar room now. Is that right?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we are all ready to go. So we'd like to start with, and we're going to hear from Maggie, and then Alfa, and then Lynn, an answer to what does prosperity for all mean to you? What are we really talking about here? And can you give an example of a time or a place where you believe you've seen people moving toward prosperity for all? So Maggie, I'm going to pull up your first slide.
That first slide is a slide representing Black Wall Street, and I'll use that as an example of what prosperity for all means to me. I'm compelled to answer this question from the Black community's perspective. In my community, that is the main area where we've fallen short. Economic prosperity, where we've been politically enfranchised and realized freedoms. The economic piece is where we've fallen short. And that lack of economic prosperity causes and results in many social crises that my community suffers disproportionately from. Still, though, prosperity for all for me has less to do with economic measures like wealth or jobs or even the number of businesses in the Black community. While, of course, those are so important, and these are the things that we talk about, that we'll be talking about today. Prosperity for all for me is achieved when our roles as Black laborers, employees, consumers, professionals, business owners becomes a source of pride and power. That's the really unique situation that the Black community faces. We feel, it's very cultural, it's very personal. We feel disenfranchised, disrespected, and not welcomed. I have a lot less money than I did before I conducted this experiment when I was back in corporate. In this transition from corporate to cause, I have a lot of less money, and I don't have the same kind of job. But I have prosperity because I use the money I do have in ways that make me proud and make me feel powerful. We need more employees and business owners in our community to have that opportunity, to feel a sense of pride and a sense of power from their role in this economy. And we don't have that yet. A lot of that comes from things we've done to ourselves, and a lot of that comes from things that have been done to us by outsiders. But until we have that feeling that we're included and that we're contributing, we will not realize prosperity for all. We had that feeling in Black Wall Street. And I'll be quick here. The bottom line is that in Black Wall Street, there were business owners from the community that cared about the community. The community benefited from that. Unemployment was economically insignificant. There were well-rounded families. And even though there were poor people in these places like the Black Wall Streets in Durham, North Carolina, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma, those people felt a sense of pride in their community, and they were welcomed and respected in the community. And that's what we're missing now in the Black community vis-a-vis the rest of the American economy. Reverse 90 real quick is a program that's trying to counter This Reverse 90 brings consumers and business owners together to try to stimulate buying local in the Philadelphia area, trying to get local black consumers to support the businesses in the black community. They call it Reverse 90 because over 90% of the money, the hard-earned wealth that's generated in the black community of Philadelphia leaves through business owners that have businesses in the black community but do not live or employ in the black community.
All right, thank you, Maggie.
Thank
and
you.
Alfa, I think you wanted to try answering this question next. Again, what does prosperity for all mean to you?
Sure. It's great to be here and pleasure to talk about such an important topic. And for us, so I run an organization called Rising Tide Capital. We're a nonprofit that's based in Jersey City, New Jersey. And our mission is around empowering communities and entrepreneurs to start strong businesses that can have transformative impact. And based on this promise, or I think we hear this saying a lot, that a rising tide lifts all boats. And our premise has been that it lifts boats, but if people don't have boats or strong boats, then they are often either swept away or disenfranchised, or often end up leaving communities where they've lived for a very long time because they're not part of that rising tide of opportunity. And just to share very briefly, and I think Maggie touches on this, there is an impact that sense of ownership within a community, a sense of participation has not only on the individual but also on the overall community. And when we first came to Jersey City a few years ago, I had a distinct experience where I drove across, not even 3 minutes away from this very emergent economy, very lively downtown, to find myself on the other side of the tracks on MLK Boulevard, where a vast majority of poverty and crime and other indicators of just disenfranchisement were rife and before me, and met a really wonderful human being who I actually decided to set up an appointment with him. He ran a program for the formerly incarcerated. He's 65 years old, African American, has lived in Jersey City his entire life, and asked him to meet me at a restaurant in downtown Jersey City. And I was waiting for him for an hour, and I said, "Where is he?" And I come outside the restaurant, and I see that he's sitting across the street on a bench. And I said, I've been waiting there for you for a long time. Why haven't you come in? And he said he didn't think he could come in. And it really kind of rocked my world and made me recognize that there are conversations to be had about inclusiveness and about what prosperity for all means, and people's sense of participation that is often invisible and assumed to have been resolved sometimes, especially in discussions around this post-racial world. And so that was really, and that was 8 years ago, and it was kind of the trigger point for us to really engage in this mission space.
Thank you, Alfa. Is there anything you'd like to share about this example?
Absolutely. So with Rising Tide Capital, part of the premise is that when we're talking about economic disparity, what does that look like, and how does it lead to prosperity, and how does ownership lead to prosperity? I think a lot of conversations about job opportunities and making sure those exist are really important, but there is a larger question around economic mobility and people's aspirations and desire to participate and to be part of the creative class where they too are shaping their destiny individually as well as for their community. So this story of Dorothy that you're looking at is Dorothy came to us in 2006. She was earning $14,000 a year. She's single mom, had huge health issues that she was struggling with, had dropped out of school, and she didn't really have a clear pathway, but she'd heard about this entrepreneurial development program that was working hands-on, very accessible in communities. And she had gotten certified to do tax prep and accounting work, but was not really quite sure where to begin. And then within, and so it takes a long time. This isn't a silver bullet proposition, but we'd been working with Dorothy over the years, and today, and that's 6 years after, she'd raised her income to over $50,000 a year. She's growing her business. Her self-confidence is through the roof. She returned to college, and she completed her degree and got her master's in accounting. She has over 150 tax prep clients, 6 small business clients who are also through the Rising Tide Network. She has a new office at one of our partner incubators and has hired her first employee. She's repaired her credit even though she had bankruptcy. And she actually works on our help desk as a consultant, where she works with other entrepreneurs in the community to help them do their taxes and understand the implications on their finances of the taxes. So this is kind of, she's exemplary, and we have 563 entrepreneurs who are part of our program, and she represents the 250 that are actually in business and growing. And sometimes you may not see them on the main streets, but they are in these communities, and in communities of high need. A part of what excites us about the future and gives us hope is that there are so many stories like Dorothy's.
Thank you, Alfa. And Lynn?
For us, prosperity begins with jobs and locally owned businesses that will allow us to care for ourselves and our families, our communities, and the planet. Jobs and businesses that give us a sense of pride and security, of connection and joy. Prosperity means that together we own and control the things that we depend on. It is the foundation for prosperity, I think. Prosperity isn't about greed and environmental degradation, but it's about wanting for our own children what we want and can give to all children on the planet. That's what I think true prosperity is about. You want to go to the next slide there? And there's my picture of joy. This is a group of students in one of our first Green Job training programs. Many of them have worked for us now for 3 years, and others have gone on to be a part of other businesses, and they're on career tracks to make a difference in the world. One of the guys there in the red sweater is, his name is Jamil, and he came to us after dropping out of school after failing 9th grade 3 times. He went into this program, he finished it, got a job working at Energia, one of the businesses that we helped start, and he's now one of the managers there in that business. And he came to me a couple years ago and said, "I'm ready for level 4." And I said, "What's level 4?" He said, "No, you remember level 4? That's when, the first level was I agree to finish the training. The second one, I agree to get a job. The third is I agree to do a career. And the fourth is I agree to give back to my community." And he said, "I want to run for the board of Co-op Power." And he did, and he's now one of the board members that I report to. And it's that sense of pride and control over our lives, I think, that really makes us feel prosperous.
Thank you, Lynn. Before we move to our second question, do any of you have anything that you'd like to react to and what the others have shared, or underscore, or ask questions about?
Well, for my sisters on the call, on the webinar, I'm very proud of what you all are doing, and I'm just so glad that I have the honor of complimenting your work. We see, Alfa, you're building up these entrepreneurs. Lynn, you're helping create jobs for folks who otherwise would not have jobs. And I think what I'm trying to do in this experiment, and why I am just piggybacking on your fantastic work, is to really get more consumers involved in this prosperity for all and building strong local economies. I think we're all consumers, need to be doing more to be a little more conscious about where we spend our money, with whom we spend our money, and to make sure that every day, you should not be going to sleep, every day you know that your money went to create a job for the young man that Lynn helped, and to support a business, like the fantastic business that you helped inspire, Alfa. So I just don't want us to diminish the role of the consumers in this piece, and just wanted to take a second to thank you guys for making my work a little bit easier.
Thank you, Maggie.
And I would also add to that the fact that, Maggie, your work around conscious consumerism is so critical because there is, for us, the mission of needing to repopulate and reestablish the entrepreneurial energy that used to exist but has diminished over time in high-need communities, in African American communities, in Hispanic communities. But once those businesses are up and running and they're providing those goods and services that impact quality of life in their communities, it's absolutely critical that people are aware that supporting them and intentionally driving their dollars to make sure that they're sustainable over time is so important. So what you're doing in terms of raising awareness, in terms of saying we need help, it's about pulling ourselves by our bootstraps, but at the same time we absolutely need to drive and to choose with our dollars what we know will make a long-term impact. And that's part of why I'm really excited about what you're doing, and it's extremely important.
And I love, Maggie, the way you started with the hearkening back to the times where, because of segregation, the Black community had its own local economy, and that that sense of pride and connection really worked. And it's a model that I think many immigrant communities have also experienced in this country. And the truth is that when we vote with our dollars for a certain lifestyle, a certain way of being, either in those in the Black community and the immigrant communities, it was often because there wasn't a choice. But because that's all been loosened up and we have this global trade going on, there's been a loss of all the things that are so dear to us. So I really appreciate that, reclaiming the best of what local economies can give us. I think it's really critical, and the consumer role is very essential.
We just have to establish a different impetus. We shouldn't be forced into creating local prospering economies by an imposed unjust legal situation, or because of language barriers, or because we fear racism or not being welcomed by others. We should really just be compelled by what BALLE is trying to promote, and it's a very strong, basic, universal tenet that we all deserve to be happy, and we all deserve to the right to create that happiness for our families and for our community. So the main message now is not just the basics that we all preach about how jobs empower communities and how empowering it is to be a business owner. It's about we need to start driving that first message. So much that's going on in the Black community, and that's why the issue is so delicate, is very cultural and very personal. Black people, because it could be because of our history here, have this issue with self-loathing and self-hate. So until we restore that sense of pride and that feeling that we can pull ourselves up by our bootstrap, until we have that intention again, it's none of this is going to be possible in my community. So the big part of the message is not just the tools, not just the resources, not just our being able to prove how much better things will be if we were to support the right businesses. It's about making these communities feel like they can be better and that they deserve to be better. And that's why it's so important that we and I know we're going to talk about that later, we talk about the partnerships and elevating these somewhat private discussions into the national dialogue. Because what's really been impactful is not just that millions saw my family buying Black, if you will, it's that they saw CBS reporting on it, or that they see organizations like BALLE partnering with us afterwards. They just couldn't conceive of the fact that folks outside of the community care about them too. And when they see that, I think that we can generate that sense of pride that will lead to the conscious consumerism and the strategic entrepreneurship and the buying local that we all want.
Thank you, Maggie. You've segued perfectly into our next question, which is, how do we, in this work, how do we talk about justice, diversity, inclusion? So as we start to get comfortable with each other, and we start to really flesh out what we really mean by prosperity and prosperity for all. So what are we really talking about? How do we take that conversation to our colleagues, to the rest of our community, to the whole localist movement, to our broader continent here? And so I think you've started moving us into that piece here about how you in particular talk about justice, diversity, and inclusion with some examples. So you started mentioning conscious consumer lifestyle and really getting this front and center in the news.
And I think what you see here is a couple of pictures, and I think what the news loves about our story, about a somewhat well-to-do, if you will, family making a conscious decision to completely live off local black businesses. It wasn't just about the statement that made. It wasn't just about how the extreme nature of the pledge. It was this kind of footage. A mom going into a dry cleaner, a mom going into a small clothing boutique and, giving business to another mom with my friend Jocelyn here and her little baby in her arms and her daughter ringing me up. These are the images that I'm trying to push every day, that image of an everyday mom, of an everyday consumer changing the world. If we had more everyday moms going to places like Jocelyn's or going to double door dry cleaners, everything can change, not just in the black community, but in our country as a whole. Jocelyn employs folks that will not have jobs otherwise, period. Just period, will not have jobs otherwise. The same thing with my friends at Double Door Dry Cleaners. So in making that small decision to buy my children's clothing from Jocelyn's store and getting my clothes dry cleaned at Double Door, I'm creating jobs. I'm a job creator, not just an everyday mom. And it gives what the message that gives other everyday moms is this whole thing about being accountable. We keep talking about jobs all the time, but we keep looking to our government and we keep blaming corporations, and rightfully so, but maybe we can start looking in the mirror. I create jobs every day. I know this for certain. I know this for a fact. So the power is not just in our pledge. It's not just in the fantastic study that Northwestern produced that proved if more conscious consumers, especially folks with $75,000 or more household incomes, in families like mine, if we were to shift our spending from right now the average black consumer, between 2 and 3% of our money makes it back to the black community. That's really awful. Our dollar lives in our community for only 6 hours. If we were to get more consumers like me to shift that 2 to 3% to 10%, Northwestern proved in the study based on my family's experiment that we could create 1 million jobs in struggling black communities with the money we already have and the businesses that we already have. But I wouldn't be able to get that really strong statement out into the world had I not done this experiment, if I didn't continue to live this lifestyle every day. So my being able to do this gives me the authority to speak credibly about the issues specifically facing the black community, and because I am an everyday mom, because I'm not a talking head, and because I really do this, it gives me the credibility, and people are more inspired by this, and they're more driven, they're more compelled to go out this and try themselves. So it's we could have done the study and produced the study and disseminated it over the web. But my being able to say with authority and honesty, because we still save our receipts, with authority and honesty that I go to that dry cleaner, that I buy coffee from a local guy, because I'm able to say that kind of stuff, it makes other everyday moms and dads want to go out and do the same thing, or at least some of it. And that's how I know I'm promoting justice and inclusion and doing my part to create prosperity for all. It's really mostly in my everyday life, and because we had the honor and the wisdom to see this pledge through, we've been able to generate unprecedented media coverage of this issue. And through that media, I use that media to continue to promote this message, show my story, and inspire others to be conscious consumers too.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I'd love, Alfa, for you to answer this question now. In your life and work, how do you talk about justice, diversity, and inclusion with examples?
Sure. So there is, I think, an interesting issue when you're looking at high-need communities, and why is it that only 2 to 3%, as Maggie was mentioning, of our consumer dollars are going to support the local businesses? Why does a black dollar live only for 6 hours in one community, in that community? And so there's actually a question I see in the chat room relating to this around low household budgets and them looking for cheapest goods and services to make ends meet. And there is that reality. The reality is, I think, so when you're looking at the average rising tide capital entrepreneur, they're actually, and they would qualify more in the working poor segment. The vast majority have jobs, except they're working low-wage jobs that cannot support them in the local economy where they live. So our average entrepreneur, single mom, 39 years old, 2 children, she's earning about $33,000 a year. She needs $48,000 in order for her to make ends meet. When you're looking at our poverty figures, which are abysmal because they haven't changed since the 30s, you're talking at $18,000 is the poverty level. And then if you're talking about the vast majority of people who have minimum wage jobs, full-time, they're making $15,000. So they're below the federal poverty guidelines that were set up in the 1930s. And no one would, in their right mind, no politician, no leader has stepped up to say, this reality clearly doesn't make sense, especially in certain localities where cost of living is so much higher. And then the explanation, or by and large part of the idea, at least in the mainstream, is there's a social safety net for all the people who are not making ends meet. But the temporary assistance for needy families, what you get in cash if you're not making anything, is $7,750 before taxes. So you're talking about that woman, if she didn't have a minimum wage job, or if she's without a job, she's looking at needing to make below $7,750 in order for her to qualify for any assistance. And so this is where entrepreneurship has to come back in, and part of it is that we're not inventing this, we're not inventing or creating the entrepreneurs. They are actually already swimming towards this trend. They're already looking at ways in which they can be entrepreneurial to generate income and fill the gap. And so a vast majority of the entrepreneurs that we're working with are trying to fill that $15,000 from $33,000 to $48,000, or they're trying to make the leap. Imagine that, from $7,750 to self-sufficiency and beyond. And so part of this messaging is very reciprocal, because definitely every single dollar that they're spending, whether it's to build their business or to survive, if they are aware of it and drive their consumerism towards other local businesses whom they have now faces to. So they know each other. They know what each other is trying to achieve. And so there is a reciprocal element here where you may get something cheaper at Walmart or going to another multinational, but the reality is you may be able to actually get it either at a competitive rate or at even sometimes reduced rate from a fellow entrepreneur in the community. So it's building that consciousness that is so utterly critical, and the economic impact of it over the long term. So that's a little bit on that, and then on the issue of building up this culture where we are investing, where we are driving our dollars into the local economy, and the fact that it has implications for the national and global economy. Right now, part of what we're trying to do is essentially create multinationals of one, if you can imagine that, and that is actually within reach. There's a great book that I've been reading, and I would share, called Abundance, and I think there are a lot of interesting ideas about the past 200 years of history that we've been going through in terms of economics, and in terms of what are the tools and resources available to us that in the past were not, and how do we harness those tools and resources and bring them to bear in the economies and the localities that need them the most to be competitive, to build businesses that are sustainable and that give life and prosperity to their economies.
Thank you, Alfa. And Lynn, how do you talk about this?
Well, we focus on what we can do together. We focus on what we have in common. It's not that we gloss over race and class and all other kind of diversity issues, but we want to spend our time focusing on who we are together and what we can accomplish. We do begin with the assumption that people of color and people from limited resource communities have not had fair access to jobs, to business development opportunities, to education, medical care, clean air, all of those things. We start by assuming the playing field has not been level, that people of color and people in limited resource communities don't have inherited wealth because their parents and their parents' parents didn't have the same opportunities to create wealth that middle class and upper middle class and upper class families have had. They often, kids don't have even support to buy a car and just to get to their first job. So we assume that things have not been just in the past, and because of that, all of our resources as a consumer-owned cooperative, our resources are invested in ways that restore justice. So we assume that we're about restoring justice. Then we look for our commonalities, and we look at what we can do together. This is a photo of us on the screen here after we've just finished installing a solar hot water system for one of our co-op power members. And this is a day that we spend as often as we can, sometimes 2 times, 3 times a month. We gather our community and we install a solar hot water system in a day. And we have people standing next to each other who are diverse in every way, passing the wrench and teaching each other how to, do this technical thing, drill through the foundation. We're doing big stuff with power tools, and women who've never picked up a wrench, or a young man who has never done anything technical, or some of our green job trainees are in a position to teach skills to other people that in a position they've never been before. So it's an opportunity to live in the world that we want to create. I just want to respond to one of the questions. When people in limited resource communities believe that their only option is to purchase cheap stuff, and people in middle class communities also believe the same thing, 90% of which is going to end up in a landfill within a year, choking our landfills. It's a lack of understanding that cheap stuff is killing us and killing the planet. People in limited resource communities in co-op power understand that the equity that they're investing in membership in co-op power gives them more power in their community, creates businesses, creates jobs, and that every dollar they spend is an investment in the community's future and the world they want to live in, and we can't afford the cheap stuff anymore. One example of how consumers are making different decisions is that these kids that some of whom came off the streets, that were in gangs, their neighbors saw that they were now holding down jobs and really proud of the work that they were doing. And so people with homeowners with very limited resources were investing in hiring these kids to come in and insulate their house, because they saw that their dollars were going to help these kids continue and to be proud of the work that they were doing. And I think as we include more people in good jobs, in business ownership, that their neighbors and friends and relatives will be moved to come and support that and maybe make some different decisions about how they're spending their money.
Great, thank you. Well, so Alexis, thank you for your questions. So you see we've been kind of weaving them through as we proceed. We welcome others to ask questions as we go along as well. I want to move to our final question in this kind of facilitated dialogue before we fully open it up. In thinking about, okay, well, where do we go from here? So if we've thought a little bit today, and again, this is the start of a conversation that will continue through this webinar series and through many other threads of our work. But as we're starting to think about what does prosperity for all really mean, to each of us and collectively, and how do we talk about this, where do we go from here? So we had a great question about examples of successful campaigns. I mentioned a little bit here in the chat window that we've had some really successful local first campaigns that have really shifted consumer spending in many communities. But as we start to bring the prosperity for all lens to that work, how can we really go deeper and how can we do more? So again, I'd love to start with you, Maggie. What are your suggestions here for folks working with local owners and to build local economies about how they can really move in this prosperity for all direction?
There's a huge opportunity space for my community in the buy local movement. We are by far, in terms of any other ethnic group, we are the group that does not practice self-help economics, does not and has not been able to really practice buying local. So the buying local message and movement is absolutely critical in the Black community and has only just begun to penetrate. So yes, it's an opportunity space. My fear is that people are so hungry for change that we're going to want to start seeing results very quickly, like the results that the local first campaigns have been having across the country. We are still in this increasing awareness and education mode. There's a lot of damage to be undone. So when I talk to partners like BALLE who care about what's going on in the community and have some resources and have some experiences and have some tools, what we want to borrow from you is the ability to continue educating outside of the community. And what we ask from you, just as, not just in your what you have built as an institution, but just in what you have in terms of soldiers and worker bees, folks who are willing to practice conscious consumerism. So the first thing I always ask is go out there and support minority businesses on your own. Do it with a friend. Make this a part of your life too, so that it's not just this, buy Black because I'm Black message. It's buy Black because the Black community deserves to be empowered too message. So we need you to that first picture right there, thanks for going back, Elsa, is a cash mob that we had in our community. We told the whole community for certain hours during the day to go support this fantastic local kind of health foods store. And when I announced that we were having this cash mob during the BALLE conference in Grand Rapids, several BALLE members showed up. They're not in that picture, but they did show up and they did support, and it meant all the world of difference to that business owner to see folks from outside of her community making an effort to support her business because her business matters. So we just hope that we don't take the buy local message to an extreme in that it would exclude Black businesses, because a lot of us don't live in the same locales. So as much as you want to support minority businesses, maybe they don't exist in your community. I'm asking you to make some effort to maybe find the minority businesses in your community and to do what these BALLE members did in coming to the South Side. We need some more Northsiders to come to the South Side and support our businesses. We also need, and you can go to the next slide, Alyssa, is any opportunity to do events together, to get this message, to make sure that we bring folks outside of the Black community into the Black community so they can see firsthand what these issues are about, and so that the Black people there can see that folks outside of the community care about this too. That is an American issue, that is, it's economic issues that impact us all. So those kind of things are really, really important for us to get beyond the education piece and get to the results piece. Again, these are my stay local friends in New Orleans who came out to the Community Book Center. It's a community center and bookstore in a very, very economically deprived part of New Orleans. And these folks came out, they supported the bookstore, they got to know some other business owners who were there, and it was just a great day for everyone involved. We need to have thousands of events like this all the time. You know, Alyssa, that we did the same thing at Ben's Chili Bowl, and it was a very, very diverse event talking about economic empowerment in Black communities. So to the extent that we can have different people in the room, it is so helpful to the movement. Other opportunities we have is to have more official partnering. Here's my friend. He heads up the Disabled Veterans Business Organization. So his fight is to make sure that veteran-owned businesses get supported. So he extended the olive branch to me and said that he would love for us to do more work together to just keep pushing this general message of conscious consumerism and supporting those businesses that give jobs to folks who wouldn't have jobs otherwise. And that was critical. It's very difficult for Black organizations like your Black Chambers of Commerce, if you will, to feel like they can call on a predominantly white organization and get help. And that's, that may be our problem and our fault, but if we were talking solutions, I'm telling you that we need the help, and a lot of us would welcome the partnering, but we might need you to just with care and compassion, do what you can to extend the olive branch. And Alyssa and I are going to be doing that together anyway. There's a lot of fertile ground there, but in terms of a real solution, we need some official partnering with organizations outside of the Black community.
All right, thank you.
Tips. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And we've got a couple extra slides here when folks get the slides later to kind of keep digging into Maggie's photographs. And Alfa and Lynn, maybe just a couple minutes each on this so that we have time also for other questions that have bubbled up.
Sure. It's I think there's a lot of lessons learned as we've been doing this work in entrepreneurship development and connecting people. I think the 3 dimensions of capital that you're seeing, that first point, is probably one of the most important points I would make. And that's, when people talk about capital, they think about financial capital. And I think the finance-centric approach sometimes can be very limiting and prevents us from thinking outside of the box about what other kinds of capital we need at the table and that we may already have. And the 2 others that we focused on very deeply is the knowledge capital, human capital piece, and then the actual social capital piece. And I would actually emphasize the social capital piece because Maggie has touched on it. We have the ability, by coming together, by connecting with one another, forming meaningful relationships across race, across economics, across neighborhoods, to do something truly extraordinary. I can tell you last night I was at an event because of this competition we've launched, a competition around excellence called the Start Something Challenge. And we had in one of the most distressed communities on a Monday night, rainy, in Orange, New Jersey, in a school, 100 people, and you had millionaires there, you had bankers there, you had white people, brown people, black people there, you had a lot of entrepreneurs there, and they were all there because they were focused on this idea that if they came together, they not only impact hope and what the future could look like economically, but also enrich each other's lives. And I can't tell you the number of people who've come to me to say, I would never, ever in a million years come to this part of town. This isn't where I hang out usually, but I'm so glad, and I've made a deep connection with, Vance the baker, or, the caricature, Akbar the caricature door, because, they've had this connection that they otherwise wouldn't. And the reality is, as we become more and more isolated because of technology or other things, we're seeking more and more connections that actually have meaning. We have a need for the unusual. And I think there's something beautiful that we can do together here that we may not feel like we have permission, but we actually do. I'm an Ethiopian. I'm sitting talking to you guys from Martin Luther King Boulevard in Jersey City, New Jersey, 99.9% African American community. And part of the beauty of the trust that has built over time is that they see the fact that, even though I'm not born from here, even though, I'm not African American in terms of being born here, there is a connection to say, you're lending us your social capital. You're lending us certain things that that we may take for granted in certain economic strata that are actually really, really high impact and can be very useful and have lasting impact. And the other thing is to really, I would say, just a couple of notes on looking at low-income communities, not just as places of need, but also centers of innovation. When you combine the need that exists in these kinds of communities and the desire to shape one's destiny and the entrepreneurial energy that exists in these communities, these are the places where a lot of new ideas will be born. And I think there's a lot of great reason to be here as an investor, as a conscious consumer, as a compassionate capitalist, so to speak, to really help raise some boats. I will not go through all of the details on this slide, but there are some great lessons, and I know Alyssa will share with everyone some of our information. You can take a look at our theory of change, and this is just a piece that will give you a sense of what the inputs are in the short term and really kind of what the bigger picture is and how much of a long-term proposition this is. This is about the long arc of history bending towards justice. And so if we're going to do that work, it's not going to come in a quarter, it's not going to come in a year. It's a multi-year, multi-decade proposal if we're talking about breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty and isolation.
Thank you, Alfa and Lynn. Do you have a couple more photos for us?
Yeah, just here are our suggestions: that we learn how to share power, that we build local inclusive businesses with really great jobs, and that we learn how to buy local, buy Black, buy Latino, buy from home businesses, buy from everyone in our community, really seek out the local entrepreneurs around us and in our region, and make an effort to make sure that our region includes the limited resource communities nearby. Here's an example just last month from our annual meeting of real power sharing, setting direction for where we're going. And the next slide is a picture of us at the end of the meeting, joyful together across lots of different communities, learning how to be together, make decisions, and move our communities toward a more just and sustainable future.
Thank you. That's a great photo to end with.
Mm-hmm.
So what questions do others that are listening have that have come up for you? And if you have, Alfa or Maggie or Lynn, while we're seeing if others have questions that have bubbled up, if you have any thoughts about what each other has shared, again, I welcome that.
I just love the long arc of history bending toward justice. I thank you, Alfa, for that statement. I like that image.
Thank you, Lynn. And the one more I would add to that is Cornel West's quote, who says, "Justice is what love looks like in public." And I think that's just a great way to kind of help us imagine concepts like justice that seem like they belong in the realm of the Supreme Court or our judicial system, more to like the ground of how we make that happen. So, thanks.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I really like that too. That is officially stolen.
It's your new tattoo.
Oh, it is. That is really great.
All right. Well, we thank everyone for joining us today. Again, this is the kickoff of a monthly webinar series where we want to keep going deeper every month in different tools and skills in finding ways to be in conversation and be in deeper collaboration as we work toward prosperity for all. So we'll be exploring things like communication strategies that actually build relationships and build collaborations and start working through barriers we may not even realize are there. We'll be talking about things like allyship. So if you happen to have come from a place where you've had fewer barriers, how can you really still walk alongside with authenticity folks who may have had more barriers? What does that look like? We'll start looking at examples of wonderful campaigns but that really bring this prosperity for all lens very explicitly to our local economies work. We may explore what it means to be an anti-racist organization or a welfare-to-work organization. Do we like those words? But what does it mean in practice? So there's a lot of things coming in this series, and I'm going to follow up with everyone who participated today, so watch for that, just so you can give us a sense about what worked for you today. And what is the conversation that you would like to see us be in together as we offer this up as a tool for our collective community to keep working to advance prosperity for all. So we really love that everybody has joined with us today, and we really so much appreciate your time, Lynn, Maggie, and Alfa, and the work you're doing in the world. And we encourage everybody who joined us today to send questions to BALLE, send ideas. We'll follow up, and let's just keep being in this conversation together as we go forward. So watch everyone in the next couple of days for a link to today's webinar recording. You can bring others in your organizations and your families and your communities into this conversation by using the archives. We'll send you these additional follow-up resources so you can go deeper on each of these organizations and the work that they're doing. And then we very much hope to have all of you join us next month as we continue to dive in. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you all. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.